He walked in that chilly New York evening, blending in with the usual crowd like any other customer. But I saw through the act. The way his expensive watch peeked from under the worn sleeve, the subtle confidence he couldn't hide. "You're not fooling anyone," I whispered as I set down his coffee. "Maybe you're serving tables for people who don't appreciate it, or cleaning up after everyone else has left. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I promise, today's story will touch your heart." My name is Margaret, but everyone at the diner just calls me Maggie. I'm 58 years old, and I've been carrying trays longer than some of my co-workers have been alive. My hands are rough from years of washing dishes in scalding water, my feet swollen from standing on linoleum floors that never seem to get any softer. The uniform I wear, a pale blue dress with a white apron, has been washed so many times the fabric feels like paper against my skin. Every morning at 5:30, my alarm buzzes in my cramped studio apartment in Queens. The radiator clanks and hisses, and through my thin walls I can hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door already bustling around, getting ready for her double shift at the hospital. I pull on the same shoes I've worn for 3 years, lace them tight around my ankles for support, and catch the first bus into Manhattan. The city never sleeps, they say, but at 6 in the morning it feels drowsy and gray. Steam rises from manholes, and the few people on the streets move like ghosts. Heads down, shoulders hunched against the cold. I transfer trains at Times Square, where the fluorescent lights buzz overhead and the smell of cleaning chemicals mixes with stale coffee from the newspaper stands. By 7, I'm pushing through the glass door of Murphy's Diner on West 47th Street. The bell above the door chimes the same tired tune it's played for the last 15 years I've worked here. The smell hits me immediately. Bacon grease, burnt coffee, and that peculiar mixture of cleaning fluid and old vinyl that seems to cling to every surface in this place. Tommy, the cook, is already flipping eggs on the griddle. He's been here longer than me, if you can believe that. His gray hair is always pulled back in a hairnet, and his forearms are covered in old burn scars from years of working over hot oil. He nods at me as I tie my apron around my waist and grab my order pad from behind the register. The morning rush starts around 7:30. Construction workers grabbing coffee and egg sandwiches to go. Office workers in rumpled suits scrolling through their phones while mechanically spooning cereal into their mouths. Taxi drivers between fares, arguing about the Mets or complaining about traffic on the FDR Drive. I know most of them by now, not their names, mind you, but their orders. Coffee black, no sugar, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, pancakes with extra syrup on the side. I move between tables like I'm dancing to music only I can hear. Coffee pot in one hand, order pad tucked into my apron pocket, always listening for the ding that signals an order is ready in the kitchen. My feet find their rhythm on the worn linoleum, stepping around the wobbly table in the corner, avoiding the spot near the window where the floor dips slightly from years of settling. The customers blur together after a while. Some are kind. They say please and thank you, leave an extra $1 on the table, ask how I'm doing, and actually wait for an answer. But most look through me like I'm part of the furniture. They snap their fingers when they want more coffee. They complain when their eggs are too runny or not runny enough. They leave messes for me to clean up. Sugar packets torn open and scattered, napkins dropped on the floor, ketchup smeared across the table like they're finger painting. Mr. Castellano, the owner, usually shows up around 10. He's a thin man with nervous eyes who counts the till 3 times every morning and watches us like we might steal the silverware. He's always talking about overhead and profit margins, about how the rent keeps going up and business keeps going down. "We need to move more coffee," he'll say, drumming his fingers on the counter. "Push the daily specials, upsell the desserts." What he doesn't understand is that you can't push anything when you're barely keeping your head above water. When Mrs. Chen at table 4 is complaining that her soup is too hot, while Mr. Peterson at table 9 is simultaneously complaining that his is too cold. When the coffee machine is making that grinding noise that means it's about to break down again, and there's a line of customers at the door checking their watches and sighing. My lunch break, when I get one, is 15 minutes in the alley behind the diner. I sit on an overturned milk crate next to the dumpster and eat whatever's left over from the morning, usually a half sandwich or a cup of soup that someone sent back. The alley smells like garbage and exhaust fumes, but it's quiet, and for those 15 minutes, nobody needs anything from me. The afternoon shift brings a different crowd, mothers with young children who spill juice boxes and scatter Cheerios across the floor, elderly couples who split the early bird special and count out exact change from little coin purses, teenagers who order one coffee and sit for 3 hours doing homework, occasionally looking up at me like I should be grateful they've graced us with their presence. I've learned to read people quickly. The woman in the business suit checking her Rolex every few minutes. She's in a hurry. Wants her check before she even orders. The man in paint-splattered clothes who counts crumpled bills from his shirt pocket. Construction pay, probably, and every dollar matters. The college student with the expensive laptop who nurses a single cup of coffee for hours. Trust fund baby pretending to be broke, or genuinely broke, pretending not to be. But that Tuesday evening in November, when the first cold snap had settled over the city and the windows were fogged with condensation, he walked in. At first glance, he looked like any other customer trying to escape the chill. Worn leather jacket, slightly too big for his frame, jeans with holes that looked deliberate but could have been from where, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. But I've been doing this long enough to notice things others miss. The way he carried himself. For one thing, not the slouched shoulders of someone beaten down by life, but the measured posture of someone used to being in control. His hands were soft when I handed him the menu, not the calloused hands of someone who worked with them for a living. And that watch, just a flash of it when his sleeve rode up as he reached for his coffee cup. Platinum, with a blue face that caught the light. I'd seen enough wealthy customers over the years to recognize quality when I saw it. He ordered simple, coffee, black, and a piece of apple pie. But he studied the menu for a long time first, like he was reading a foreign language. Most people know what they want before they sit down in a place like this, or at least they decide quickly. This was someone trying to figure out what a normal person would order. "You're not fooling anyone," I said quietly as I refilled his cup. I didn't mean it as an accusation, just an observation. But the way he froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips, told me I'd hit a nerve. His eyes darted around the diner, probably checking to see if anyone else had heard. But the dinner crowd was thin that night. Just Mrs. Rodriguez from my building having her usual bowl of soup, and a couple of truck drivers arguing about the best route to Albany. Nobody was paying attention to us. "I don't know what you mean," he said, but his voice had changed. The rough edges he'd been putting on were gone, replaced by the crisp diction of someone who'd had expensive schooling. I shrugged and moved to wipe down the next table. "Suit yourself." But I kept watching him out of the corner of my eye, the way he held his fork, the way he cut his pie into precise triangles before eating it, even the way he left his money on the table, not crumpled bills pulled from a pocket, but crisp 20s folded neatly together. He came back the next night and the night after that, same table by the window, same order, same careful act, but I could see cracks in his performance. The second night, he forgot to roughen his voice when he said thank you. The third night, I caught him checking what looked like stock prices on his phone. On the fourth night, I decided to test my theory. "How's the coffee tonight, Mr.?" I let the question hang in the air. "Johnson," he said quickly. "Mike Johnson." I nodded like I believed him. "Well, Mr. Johnson, this blend has notes of Colombian and Ethiopian beans. The Ethiopian beans give it that bright, fruity finish. Most people don't notice, but you seem like someone who appreciates quality." His fork paused midway to his mouth. "You know coffee." "I know a lot of things. 20 years in this business, you pick up details." I topped off his cup. "You've got an expensive palate hiding under that everyman act." This time, he didn't deny it, just looked at me with something that might have been respect. "How long have you known?" "Since the first night. The watch was a dead giveaway." He looked down at his wrist where his sleeve had ridden up again. This time, he didn't bother to pull it down. I guess I'm not as good at this as I thought." "Good at what? Pretending to be poor? Why would you want to do that?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the traffic crawling down 47th Street. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "When's the last time someone looked at you and saw dollar signs instead of a person?" Now it was my turn to be quiet, because the truth was I'd never had that problem. When people looked at me, they saw exactly what I was: a tired waitress in a cheap uniform, someone whose time and energy were worth minimum wage plus tips, if I was lucky. "Fair enough," I said finally, "but let me ask you this. When's the last time someone looked at you and didn't see you at all? When's the last time you were invisible?" He met my eyes then, and I saw something shift in his expression, like he was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. His name, I learned over the following weeks, wasn't Mike Johnson. It was William Ashford III, and his family's investment firm managed assets worth more than most small countries' GDP. He owned a penthouse on the Upper East Side, a house in the Hamptons, and enough stock options to fund a small space program. His daily allowance was probably more than I made in a month, but he kept coming back to the diner, night after night, dropping the act bit by bit. He told me he'd started coming to places like Murphy's because he wanted to understand what life looked like for normal people. His board of directors had been pressuring him to invest in more service industry businesses, restaurants, hotels, retail chains. Market research, he called it. But somewhere along the way, he said one particularly busy evening as I rushed between tables, it stopped being about business. I paused in wiping down the counter. "What do you mean?" "I mean I started actually listening to people, watching how hard you work for what you get, how much dignity you maintain even when customers treat you like garbage." He gestured at the man in booth 3, who was currently snapping his fingers at Carmen, our other waitress, because his burger was taking too long. "That guy probably makes 6 figures, but he's got less class than anyone in this room." It was strange, forming a friendship with someone whose net worth probably exceeded the city's annual budget. But William, he'd asked me to call him that instead of Mr. Ashford, seemed genuinely interested in my life. He asked about my daughter, who was finishing nursing school in Albany. He remembered that I'd mentioned wanting to take art classes someday. He even brought me books sometimes, novels I'd mentioned wanting to read but couldn't afford to buy. The other customers didn't pay him much attention once he'd settled into his regular routine. To them, he was just another working-class guy grabbing dinner before heading home to his wife and kids. They didn't notice the expensive shoes he'd started wearing, or the fact that he never seemed to worry about money when the check came. But Mr. Castellano noticed. It was a Wednesday night in early December when everything went wrong. The diner was busier than usual, office Christmas parties letting out, people shopping for last-minute gifts, couples on dates who couldn't afford fancier restaurants. Every table was full, and I was moving as fast as my tired legs could carry me. The woman at table 7 had been nursing the same cup of coffee for 2 hours while talking on her phone about what sounded like a very messy divorce. She was well-dressed with the kind of manicured nails that cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. Her coat was draped over the back of her chair, one of those wool designer things that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I was carrying a full tray of food to table 4 when it happened. The businessman at table 2, drunk probably from whatever office party he'd just left, stood up abruptly and bumped into me as I passed his table. The tray tilted, and the bowl of tomato soup I was carrying tipped over. Most of it landed on the floor, but some of it, maybe a spoonful, splashed onto the sleeve of that expensive coat. The woman looked up from her phone call, saw the red stain spreading across the beige wool, and screamed. Not yelped, not gasped, screamed like I'd just murdered her child. "You idiotic bitch!" she shrieked, loud enough that every conversation in the diner stopped dead. "Do you have any idea how much this coat cost? This is a Burberry. It's worth more than you make in 6 months." I set the tray down on the nearest table and grabbed a clean towel from my apron. "I'm so sorry. Let me try to clean that up. Don't touch it. She jerked away from me like I was contagious. You'll just make it worse. God, how can someone be so clumsy? Don't they train you people at all? The drunk businessman who'd actually caused the accident had already slipped out the door. Nobody seemed to have noticed that part except me. And William, I realized, looking over at his table by the window. His face was dark with anger, but he stayed seated. Mr. Castellano came rushing over, wringing his hands like he was auditioning for a Shakespearean tragedy. "Ma'am, I am so sorry about this. Maggie, what happened here? I was carrying a tray and—" "She wasn't paying attention," the woman interrupted, her voice getting shriller by the word. "She just threw soup all over my coat. I want her fired right now." "Now, let's not be hasty," Mr. Castellano said, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. This woman looked like money, and money talked louder than 20 years of reliable service. "Maggie, maybe you should take a break." "A break?" The woman's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "I want her gone. Do you know who I am? My husband is a partner at Morrison, Klein and Associates. We could shut this place down with a single phone call." I stood in the middle of the diner, tomato soup soaking into my shoes, while this woman screamed at me. Every eye in the place was on us, some sympathetic, some just curious to see what would happen next. I felt smaller with each word she spoke, like I was shrinking into the floor. "Ma'am," I said quietly, "I understand you're upset, but if you'll just let me—" "You understand nothing," she spat. "You're just a waitress, a nobody. People like you are disposable." That's when William stood up. He didn't say anything at first, just walked slowly across the diner until he was standing next to me. The woman looked up at him, probably expecting support from another customer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of her, of the coat, of the puddle of soup on the floor. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded. "Documenting," he said calmly, "for insurance purposes. See? What you don't realize is that this establishment has security cameras." He pointed to the corner where a small camera was mounted, so discreet that most people never noticed it. Those cameras caught everything that happened here tonight, including the actual cause of this accident. The woman's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about the drunk businessman who stood up and knocked into Maggie while she was carrying that tray. You know, the one who left right after it happened." William's voice remained perfectly level, but there was steel underneath it. "I'm also talking about false accusations, verbal abuse, and what I'm pretty sure qualifies as harassment of a service worker." Mr. Castellano was looking back and forth between them like he was watching a tennis match. "Now, let's everybody just calm down." "I am calm," William said, "but I think this lady should know that I happen to be very familiar with Morrison, Klein and Associates. In fact, they handle some legal work for my family's investment firm. Small world, isn't it?" The woman's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Now," William continued, "I suggest you pay for your coffee and leave, and maybe next time you'll think twice before verbally abusing someone who's just trying to do their job." She grabbed her coat and her purse, threw a $5 bill on the table, and stormed out without another word. The bell above the door chimed angrily as it slammed shut behind her. The diner was quiet for a moment before conversation slowly resumed. A few customers nodded approvingly at William or smiled sympathetically at me. But Mr. Castellano pulled me aside near the kitchen. "Maggie, I need to see you in my office." My heart sank. I knew that tone. I'd heard it before when other employees had been let go. I followed him into the cramped space behind the kitchen that served as his office, William trailing behind us. "Sir, this is a private conversation," Mr. Castellano said to William. "No, it's not." William's voice had gone cold. "Not when it concerns someone I care about." Mr. Castellano looked confused. "I'm sorry. Who are you exactly?" "Someone who just prevented you from getting sued for wrongful termination." William pulled out his wallet, but instead of cash, he extracted a business card. William Ashford and Associates Investment Management. We handle a portfolio worth approximately $800 million, including several restaurant chains. Mr. Castellano's face went white as he read the card. Now, William continued, would you like to explain why you were about to fire an employee for an accident that wasn't her fault? I wasn't going to fire anyone. I was just going to suggest that maybe Maggie should be more careful. She was careful. I watched the whole thing. Your customer was drunk and careless. Maggie was doing her job perfectly. William leaned against the doorframe, completely relaxed. But let's say, hypothetically, that you did fire her. Do you know what that would look like to the Department of Labor, or to a civil rights attorney, or to the Food Service Workers Union? I stared at him. In all the time I'd known him, I'd never seen this side of William, the side that could make a grown man tremble just by speaking quietly. Of course, I'm sure none of that will be necessary, William said, straightening up, because you're going to do the right thing here, aren't you, Mr. Castellano? Yes, of course. Maggie, please forget everything I said. You're a valuable employee. Very valuable. Good. William smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure Maggie appreciates your support, don't you, Maggie? I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hands were shaking. From relief, from anger, from the sheer surreal nature of what had just happened. William and I left the office together. He walked me back to my station, his hand light on my elbow. You okay? I don't know. My voice came out hoarse. I've never had anyone stand up for me like that. Everyone deserves someone in their corner. But why? I mean, I appreciate it, but you barely know me, and you could have just kept pretending to be someone else. Nobody would have known. He was quiet for a moment, looking around the diner, at Tommy flipping burgers in the kitchen, at Carmen taking an order from a young couple, at the elderly man in the corner booth who came in every Tuesday for pie and coffee. A few months ago, if someone had asked me to describe the people who work in places like this, I would have used words like unskilled or replaceable. I thought wealth meant intelligence, and poverty was a sign of personal failure. He shook his head. But watching you work these past few weeks, listening to your stories, seeing how you treat every customer with dignity even when they don't return the favor, it made me realize how wrong I was. I picked up my order pad and straightened my apron. So this was all just a learning experience for you, slumming it with the working class? It started that way, he admitted, but it became something else. You became someone important to me. And watching that woman tear you down, seeing your boss ready to throw you away to save himself, it made me angrier than I've been in years. The dinner rush was winding down. Most of the tables were empty now, just a few late diners lingering over dessert. I started stacking plates and wiping down surfaces, trying to process what had just happened. The security cameras, I said, as William put on his jacket. Do they really show what happened? He grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him all night. I have no idea. I was bluffing, but she didn't know that. Despite everything, I laughed. You could have gotten us both in trouble. Maybe, but it worked, didn't it? After he left that night, I sat in the empty diner and thought about what he'd said, about everyone deserving someone in their corner. I'd been fighting my battles alone for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have an ally. But I also thought about the power he'd wielded so effortlessly. The way Mr. Castellano had transformed from dismissive boss to obsequious servant the moment he saw that business card. The way a few words about lawsuits and portfolios had changed everything. It was impressive. It was also terrifying. Because what happened when William got bored with his social experiment and moved on? What happened when I was just the old waitress again, with no mysterious protector lurking at table 6? The next few days passed without incident, but I could feel the tension humming under the surface. Mr. Castellano was overly friendly, asking about my daughter and complimenting my service in ways that felt forced and anxious. Carmen kept shooting me curious looks, clearly dying to know what had happened in that office, but too polite to ask directly. William still came in every night, but something had shifted between us. The easy anonymity of our friendship was gone, replaced by the uncomfortable awareness of the vast gulf between our worlds. He was slumming it. I was living it. He could leave any time. This was my life. On Thursday night, it all came to a head. I was taking the order from a young couple who were clearly on one of their first dates. Nervous laughter, awkward pauses, both of them trying too hard to impress each other. The girl ordered a salad she probably didn't want. The boy ordered steak he probably couldn't afford. Young love, written in careful menu selections. William was at his usual table, reading a newspaper and occasionally glancing up to watch me work. But tonight felt different. Heavier somehow, like a storm was building just outside the range of hearing. The couple was just finishing their meal when she walked in. This time, I recognized her immediately. Pamela Morrison. Yes, that Morrison of Morrison, Klein & Associates. William's bluff had been closer to the truth than he'd known. Her husband was indeed a partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, and she had enough money and connections to be genuinely dangerous. But she was also smart enough to learn from her mistakes. She took a seat at the counter, ordered coffee and a slice of pie, and was the picture of politeness. "Thank you so much," she said when I brought her order. "This looks delicious." I waited for the other shoe to drop. It came 20 minutes later, just as I was getting ready to clean the coffee machine for the night. She called me over with a gentle wave, not the imperious snap she'd used before. "Excuse me, dear," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "I was wondering if I could have just a moment of your time." I glanced around the diner. We were nearly empty. Just her, William, and an elderly man who was nodding off over his newspaper. "Sure." "I wanted to apologize for the other night. I was having a terrible day and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." I blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, thank you. That means a lot." "Good." Her smile widened. "Because I'd hate for there to be any bad feelings between us, especially since I understand we might be seeing more of each other soon." My stomach clenched. "I'm sorry?" "Well, my husband's firm is in the process of acquiring the lease on this building. We're planning to renovate, turn it into something more upscale. A wine bar, maybe, or a gastropub. The neighborhood is really coming up, you know." The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. What does that mean for the diner?" "Oh, the current business arrangement will be terminated, of course. But don't worry, I'm sure a woman with your experience will find something else quickly. There are always restaurants looking for people like you." She said it so sweetly, with such perfect politeness, that it took me a moment to understand what was happening. This wasn't an apology. It was revenge, served cold and legal and utterly devastating. "When?" I whispered. "Oh, these things take time. Permits, inspections, all that bureaucracy. I'd say you probably have another month or two." She took a delicate sip of her coffee. "Just enough time to start looking for something new." I stood there, numb with shock, as she finished her pie and left exact change on the counter. "Have a wonderful evening, dear," she said as she gathered her coat and purse. "And do give my regards to your friend over there." She nodded toward William's table as she walked out, letting me know that she knew exactly who had humiliated her and exactly how she planned to make us both pay. I walked over to William's table on unsteady legs and sank into the chair across from him. He took one look at my face and closed his newspaper. What happened? I told him everything. The building purchase, the renovation plans, the sweet, venomous way she'd delivered the news. He listened in silence, his jaw getting tighter with each word. "She can't do this," he said when I finished. "She can, and she is. Her husband's law firm has enough money to buy this whole block if they want to." I laughed bitterly. "You know what the worst part is? She's right. The neighborhood is changing. Places like this don't fit the image anymore." "So that's it? You're just going to give up?" "What choice do I have? Go up against one of the most powerful law firms in the city? With what money? What connections? I shook my head. People like her always win in the end. People like me just try to land somewhere soft when we fall. William was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the traffic. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but determined. No. No what? No, she doesn't get to win this one. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through contacts. Give me 24 hours. William, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but trust me. He stood up and put on his jacket, then paused to squeeze my shoulder. Just trust me. The next night, Friday. I came to work expecting it to be like any other night. Maybe my last few weeks at Murphy's, but normal until then. Mr. Castellano was his usual nervous self. Tommy was flipping burgers and humming off-key. Carmen was complaining about her boyfriend's refusal to commit. But William didn't come in. 8 o'clock passed, then 9. By 10:30, I was genuinely worried. He'd been as reliable as clockwork for months, and his absence felt ominous. At 11:15, just as I was starting to clean up for the night, the door chimed and he walked in. But he wasn't alone. The woman with him was maybe 40, impeccably dressed in the kind of suit that screamed expensive lawyers or high-end real estate. Her hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone used to being the smartest person in the room. Behind them came a younger man with a camera and a press badge hanging around his neck, followed by another woman with a tablet and the intense look of someone taking notes. Maggie, William said as they approached my station, I'd like you to meet some people. This is Jennifer Chen. She's a reporter with the Times. This is David Rodriguez, her photographer. And this is Sarah Washington. She's a civil rights attorney who specializes in workplace discrimination. I looked back and forth between them, completely bewildered. I don't understand. Jennifer Chen stepped forward with a warm smile. Ms. O'Brien, I'm working on a story about gentrification in Manhattan and how it affects working-class communities. William contacted me yesterday and told me about your situation here. Would you be willing to talk with me about your experiences? What kind of story? The kind that shines a light on predatory business practices, Sarah Washington interjected. The kind that shows how personal vendettas get disguised as economic development. The kind that makes powerful people very uncomfortable. I looked at William. What did you do? Some research. Turns out the Morrison firm has a pattern of acquiring buildings in gentrifying neighborhoods, evicting existing businesses, and flipping them for massive profits. This isn't about urban renewal. It's about revenge, and it's part of a much bigger scheme. Jennifer Chen pulled out a small recording device. Would you mind if we sat down? I'd love to hear your story in your own words. For the next hour, I told them everything, not just about the incident with Pamela Morrison, but about my life in the diner. The customers who treated me like furniture, the management who saw me as disposable, the way gentrification was slowly erasing places where working people could afford to eat. David took photographs. The worn linoleum, the mismatched chairs, the framed photo of the diner from 1987 when Mr. Castellano first opened it. He captured the realness of the place, the lived-in humanity that Pamela Morrison wanted to scrub away and replace with exposed brick and craft cocktails. Sarah Washington took notes about workplace conditions, tenant rights, and discrimination. She asked detailed questions about the timeline of events, about witnesses to the original incident, about any documentation I might have. Here's the thing, she said as she flipped through her legal pad. Personal retaliation disguised as business development is a very murky legal area. But when it's part of a broader pattern of behavior, when it affects entire communities, that's when we start to have a case. By the time they left, it was nearly 1 a.m. The diner was long closed, and William and I sat alone in the dim light from the street lamps outside. I don't know if I did the right thing, I said finally. What do you mean? Talking to reporters, getting lawyers involved. What if it just makes things worse? What if she comes after me harder now? William reached across the table and took my hand. His was smooth and warm. Mine was rough from years of work, but he held it like it was precious. Maggie, you've spent 20 years being invisible, being the person everyone looks through instead of at, but you're not invisible anymore. He squeezed my fingers gently. You're the story now, and that means you have power. The article ran the following Tuesday on the front page of the Metro section. The headline read, "When Gentrification Gets Personal, How One Woman's Complaint Became a Neighborhood's Fight." Jennifer Chen had done her homework. The piece wasn't just about me and the diner. It was about the Morrison firm's acquisition of 6 other buildings in the past 2 years, about the family businesses that had been displaced, about the affordable housing that had been eliminated. It was about how Manhattan's working-class communities were being systematically erased. My story was just one example, but it was the one with a human face. The photograph David had taken, me standing behind the counter with my order pad and tired smile, became the image that people remembered. By Wednesday morning, my phone was ringing constantly. Other reporters wanting follow-up interviews, community organizers asking if I'd speak at rallies, a documentary filmmaker interested in optioning my story. But the most important call came Thursday afternoon. "Ms. O'Brien, this is James Morrison from Morrison, Klein & Associates." My blood went cold. "Mr. Morrison, I wanted to call personally to discuss the situation with your workplace. I think there may have been some misunderstandings." "What kind of misunderstandings?" "Well, it seems my wife may have given you the impression that our firm was planning to acquire your building for development purposes. I want to assure you that's not the case." I was quiet for a moment, trying to process what he was saying. "So you're not buying the building?" "No, we're not. In fact, we never were. I'm not sure where that idea came from, but I want to make it absolutely clear that Morrison, Klein has no interest in restaurant development." His voice was carefully controlled, professionally apologetic. "I hope this clears up any confusion." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the newspaper folded open to my story. The power of publicity, I realized. The power of having your story told by someone who knew how to tell it effectively. William came by that evening, as I knew he would. "So," he said as I poured him coffee, "I hear you're staying put." "Looks like it. Though I still don't understand how that happened." Public pressure is a wonderful thing, especially when it threatens to expose a pattern of behavior that certain law firms would prefer to keep quiet. He took a sip of coffee. Amazing how quickly misunderstandings can be cleared up when reporters start asking questions. "And you knew this would happen when you called Jennifer Chen?" "I hoped it would happen. There's a difference." He set down his cup and looked at me seriously. "But even if it hadn't worked, even if they'd gone through with it, you wouldn't have been alone. You know that, right?" I did know. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I knew that someone was in my corner. Someone who saw me as more than just the person who brought his coffee. But I also knew something else. "I need to ask you something," I said. "And I need you to be honest with me." He nodded. "What happens next? I mean, this has been an adventure for you, right? Playing normal, getting involved in the real world. But eventually you're going to get bored and go back to your penthouse and your board meetings. What happens to me then?" He was quiet for a long time, and I thought maybe I'd offended him. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "You're right that this started as an adventure, a way to understand how the other half lives. But somewhere along the way, it became the most real thing in my life." He looked around the diner, at the cracked vinyl booths, the coffee-stained counter, the menu board with half the letters missing. "I have a penthouse worth $12 million, and I'd rather spend my evenings here. I have access to 5-star restaurants all over the city, and I'd rather eat your apple pie. I know people who manage billions of dollars in assets, and none of them are as smart or as strong as you." "William." "I'm not going anywhere, Maggie. Not unless you want me to." The weeks that followed were strange and wonderful. The diner's 15 minutes of fame brought in new customers, some tourists wanting to see the place from the newspaper, some neighborhood people who'd never noticed us before, some activists who wanted to support a symbol of resistance. Business picked up enough that Mr. Castellano hired another waitress and gave the rest of us our first raise in 3 years. He also installed a new coffee machine and fixed the broken booth seats, investments in the place that felt like investments in us. William kept coming in, but gradually our relationship shifted. Instead of the mysterious regular customer and the waitress who saw through his disguise, we became something more complicated. Friends, certainly, but also something harder to define. He started helping me with things outside the diner. When my landlord tried to raise my rent, William connected me with a tenants' rights lawyer. When I mentioned wanting to take a computer class, he found a program and offered to pay for it. Not in a paternalistic way, but like someone who genuinely wanted to see me succeed. "I don't want charity," I told him one night after he'd offered to help me with my daughter's student loan payments. "It's not charity, it's friendship. It's investment in someone I care about." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Maggie, I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. But until I met you, I had no idea what to do with it that felt meaningful. So I'm your pet project? No, you're my teacher." That stopped me cold. Your teacher. You've taught me more about dignity and grace under pressure than anyone I've ever known. You've shown me what real strength looks like, what real service means, the way you treat every customer with respect, even the ones who don't deserve it, the way you keep showing up, keep working, keep caring even when the world treats you like you're invisible. He shook his head. "I spent 40 years thinking money was the most powerful force in the world. Then I watched you stand up to that woman with nothing but your own integrity, and I realized how wrong I was." I thought about that conversation for days afterward, about power and money and the different forms strength can take, about visibility and invisibility, about the people who serve and the people who are served. 6 months later, William made me an offer that changed my life. "I want to buy this building," he said one quiet Tuesday evening. "Not to tear it down or renovate it, to preserve it, to make sure places like this don't disappear from the city." I stared at him. "You want to buy Murphy's Diner?" "I want to buy the building and make sure Murphy's Diner stays exactly what it is. A place where working people can afford to eat, a place where conversations happen across class lines, a place where someone like you can build a career with dignity and respect." "What about Mr. Castellano? He'd stay as manager if he wants. Same menu, same staff, same prices. The only thing that would change is the security of knowing that no one can ever force you out again." "And what would you get out of it?" He smiled. "The satisfaction of knowing that sometimes money can be used to preserve things instead of destroying them, and the knowledge that I'll always have somewhere to get the best apple pie in Manhattan." The sale went through 2 months later. Mr. Castellano kept his job, but with better benefits and a commitment to treating his employees fairly. Carmen got promoted to assistant manager. Tommy finally got the new grill he'd been asking for since before I started working there. And me? I got something I'd never had before, job security. The knowledge that I wouldn't have to start over somewhere else. That 20 years of experience and relationships weren't going to be thrown away because someone decided the neighborhood needed upgrading. But more than that, I got a friend, someone who saw me not as a waitress or a symbol or a project, but as a person worth knowing. Someone who understood that dignity isn't about how much money you have or what job you do, but about how you treat others and how you move through the world. The diner looks the same as it always did. The coffee still tastes like it's been sitting on the burner too long. The floors still creak in all the same places, and the bell above the door still chimes that same tired tune. But something essential has changed. The customers still range from kind to indifferent to rude. I still carry trays and refill coffee cups and wipe down tables. My feet still ache at the end of a long shift, and I still take my 15-minute breaks in the alley behind the building. But I'm not invisible anymore. Not to William, who still comes in 3 nights a week for coffee and conversation. Not to my coworkers who know I played a role in improving their working conditions. Not to the regular customers who remember me from the newspaper and treat me with a little more respect. Most importantly, I'm not invisible to myself. For 20 years, I defined myself by my usefulness to others. I was the waitress who brought your food, the woman who cleaned up your messes, the person who smiled and said thank you even when you treated me poorly. Now I know I'm more than that. I'm someone whose story matters, someone whose dignity is non-negotiable. Someone who deserves kindness and respect, not because of what I do, but because of who I am. Last month, my daughter graduated from nursing school. She invited me to the ceremony, and for the first time in years, I was able to take the day off without worrying about losing pay or getting in trouble with management. I sat in the audience wearing a new dress. Not expensive, but new, bought because I wanted it, not because I needed it, and watched her cross that stage. Afterward, she introduced me to her friends and classmates, not as my mom who works in a diner, but as my mom who was in the New York Times. The pride in her voice made me stand a little straighter. That evening, William took us both out to dinner at a restaurant where the waitresses wore black dresses instead of coffee-stained aprons, and the menu was written in cursive on chalkboards. It could have been awkward. The rich man, the working mother, the recent graduate. But it wasn't. We talked about books and movies and politics, about my daughter's plans to work in pediatric nursing, about William's efforts to invest in affordable housing projects, about the documentary filmmaker who was still trying to talk me into letting her option my story. At the end of the night, as we were waiting for a taxi, my daughter pulled me aside. "Mom, I'm proud of you." For what? For not disappearing, for standing up. For showing me that it's possible to be strong even when the world tries to make you small. I thought about those words as I rode the subway home to Queens, about strength and invisibility, about service and dignity, about the difference between being useful and being valued. The truth is, I'm still a waitress. I still get up before dawn and catch the early bus into Manhattan. I still carry trays and refill coffee cups and listen to customers complain about everything from the weather to the speed of service. But I do it now with the knowledge that my story matters, that the kindness I show to every customer, the patient explanation of today's specials, the extra attention to the elderly man who comes in every Tuesday for pie, the gentle way I handle the stressed-out parents juggling work calls and toddler meltdowns, all of that has value beyond the tip left on the table. I do it knowing that someone sees me, that my friendship with William, unlikely as it began, is real and lasting, that the letters I still get from women who read about my story matter, that the small daily acts of dignity and grace I perform in a diner on West 47th Street ripple outward in ways I may never fully understand. I do it knowing that I'm not invisible anymore, not to the world and most importantly, not to myself. But the most meaningful change came 6 months after the article was published, on a particularly busy Thursday night in spring. The dinner rush was in full swing. Tourists who'd read about us online, neighborhood regulars, office workers grabbing a quick meal before heading home. Every table was full, and I was moving between them with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing this dance for decades. That's when I noticed her. She was sitting alone at table 12, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 22. Her clothes were clean but worn, and she studied the menu with the careful attention of someone counting every dollar. When I approached her table, she looked up with the particular kind of tired that comes from working multiple jobs and still not making ends meet. "What can I get for you tonight, honey?" Just coffee, please. And maybe..." She hesitated, clearly doing math in her head. "How much is the soup?" I glanced at the menu. The soup of the day is chicken noodle, and it's $4.50. But you know what? We made a little too much today, and I hate to see it go to waste. How about I bring you a bowl with some bread? On the house. Her eyes widened. "Are you sure? I don't want to—" "I'm sure. You look like you've had a long day." As I walked away to get her order, I caught William watching me from his usual table. He smiled and nodded, and I knew he understood what I was doing. The kindness that someone had shown me when I needed it most passed on to another person who needed it now. The young woman's name was Jessica, I learned as the evening went on. She was working 2 jobs while trying to finish community college, living in a studio apartment in Brooklyn with a roommate she barely knew. She reminded me so much of myself at that age, tired but determined, proud but struggling, invisible to most of the world. Over the following weeks, she became a regular, always ordering carefully, always grateful for any small kindness. I made sure she got the biggest portions, the freshest coffee, the warmest service. Not because Mr. Castellano told me to, or because I expected a big tip, but because I remembered what it felt like to be in her position. One evening, as I was refilling her coffee cup, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Why are you so nice to me?" she asked. "Most people look right through me like I'm not even here." I set down the coffee pot and sat across from her for a moment, because I know what that feels like, and because everyone deserves to be seen. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. "I saw the article about you online, about the lady who tried to get you fired and how that rich guy stood up for you. That must have been scary." It was. But it also taught me something important. What? That invisibility isn't just about how others see you. Sometimes we make ourselves invisible because it feels safer than being noticed. But being seen, really seen, that's when life starts to have meaning. Jessica nodded, understanding more than her 22 years should have allowed. "I'm studying to be a teacher, elementary education. I want to work with kids who don't get seen much at home." "That's beautiful. The world needs more teachers who understand what it feels like to be overlooked." 3 months later, Jessica got a scholarship that covered the rest of her tuition. She still came into the diner, but now it was to share good news instead of just seeking a warm place to sit. She'd gotten an internship at a school in the Bronx. She'd found a better apartment. She'd started dating a fellow education student who treated her with genuine respect. "You changed my life," she told me one evening as she prepared to leave for her student teaching assignment. "No, honey, you changed your own life. I just made sure you had enough coffee to power through those late-night study sessions." But I knew what she meant. Sometimes the smallest acts of recognition can shift everything for someone. A free bowl of soup when you're counting coins. A friendly face when the world feels cold. The simple acknowledgement that you exist, that you matter, that your struggles and dreams are valid. This is what William had done for me in his own way, not just with his money or his connections, but with his willingness to see me as a complete person rather than just a service provider. And now I was paying it forward. 1 cup of coffee at a time. The documentary about my story finally came out 2 years later. The filmmaker, Maria Santos, had spent months interviewing not just me and William, but dozens of other service workers throughout the city. The film, titled Visible, premiered at a small theater in the village, and to my amazement, it was packed. Sitting in that theater, watching my life play out on screen, was surreal. There I was, in grainy security camera footage from the diner, moving between tables with tired determination. There was the recreation of the confrontation with Pamela Morrison, with an actress who looked remarkably like me, standing her ground with quiet dignity. But what struck me most were the interviews with other workers, hotel housekeepers, janitors, delivery drivers, retail clerks, all with their own stories of being overlooked, undervalued, or mistreated, all finding their own ways to maintain dignity in jobs that society often dismissed as unimportant. After the screening, there was a panel discussion. I sat on stage next to Maria, William, and Sarah Washington, the civil rights attorney who'd helped with my case. The audience was full of people from all walks of life, some clearly wealthy, others obviously working class, many somewhere in between. A woman in the audience raised her hand. "Ms. O'Brien, what would you say to other service workers who feel invisible in their jobs?" I thought for a moment before answering. I'd say that your work matters, even when it feels like no one notices. Every kindness you show, every time you go above and beyond for someone who might not even say thank you, that ripples out into the world in ways you might never know about. And remember that being seen isn't just about how others treat you. It's about seeing yourself clearly, knowing your own worth, and refusing to shrink yourself to fit into other people's limited expectations. Another person asked William what he'd learned from his experience. That privilege isn't just about money, he said. It's about being seen as three-dimensional by default, being given the benefit of the doubt, having your story matter to people in power, learning to recognize that privilege is the first step toward using it responsibly. After the event, as people were filing out, a middle-aged man approached me. He was dressed in an expensive suit, and something about his bearing reminded me of the customers who used to snap their fingers at me for more coffee. "Ms. O'Brien," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Robert Chen. I own a chain of restaurants in the tri-state area." My hackles went up slightly. I'd learned to be wary of businessmen who introduced themselves by talking about what they owned. "I wanted to thank you," he continued, and his tone was sincere. "Watching your story made me realize some things about how I've been running my businesses, about how I've been treating my employees. It's easy to think about labor costs and efficiency metrics and forget that every name on the payroll is a person with a full life outside of work." He pulled out a business card. "I'd like to hire you as a consultant to help me train my management staff on how to create more respectful, dignified workplaces. Would you be interested in something like that?" I stared at the card. Margaret O'Brien, Workplace Dignity Consultant. It had a nice ring to it. Over the next year, I found myself traveling to restaurants, hotels, and retail stores throughout the region, conducting workshops for managers and supervisors. My message was simple but revolutionary for many of them. Treat your employees like human beings, not just labor units. I taught them about the hidden costs of high turnover, about the way dignity and respect could improve both morale and customer service. I shared stories from my own experience and from the other workers I'd met while making the documentary. I helped them understand that the person serving their coffee or cleaning their office or stocking their shelves had hopes and dreams and challenges just as complex as their own. It wasn't always easy. Some managers resented being lectured by a former waitress. Some owners saw employee dignity as a nice-to-have rather than a necessity. But others genuinely wanted to do better, and I could see the changes taking root in their companies. The consulting work didn't mean I left Murphy's Diner entirely. I still worked 3 shifts a week, partly because I needed the income, but mostly because I loved it. The diner remained my anchor, my reminder of where I came from and what really mattered. It was also where I continued to practice what I preached, treating every customer with respect, noticing the ones who seemed to need extra kindness, mentoring new employees who were just starting out in the service industry. Carmen had become the full manager when Mr. Castellano decided to retire to Florida. She was better at the job than he'd ever been, more organized, more supportive of the staff, more willing to stand up to difficult customers. Under her leadership, the diner became known not just for its food, but for its workplace culture. "You know what the difference is?" she said to me one evening as we were closing up. "Mr. Castellano always acted like he was doing us a favor by giving us jobs. You taught me that we're doing him a favor by making his business successful with our hard work. There's a difference between being grateful for employment and knowing your worth as an employee." Tommy had trained 2 new cooks and was talking about opening his own place someday. The new waitresses we'd hired were younger than me, but old enough to understand that this was real work that deserved respect. We'd created something special at Murphy's, a place where employees felt valued and customers sensed the difference. William still came in regularly, though our relationship had evolved beyond the diner walls. We attended cultural events together, traveled occasionally, spent holidays with each other's families. My daughter adored him, and he'd become something like an uncle to her future children. People sometimes asked if we were romantically involved, And the honest answer was complicated. We cared deeply for each other, but our connection transcended traditional categories. He was my closest friend, my biggest supporter, my partner in trying to make the world a little more just. Whatever label people wanted to put on, that was fine with me. On the 3rd anniversary of the night he'd first walked into Murphy's Diner, William surprised me with a gift. It was a plaque that read, "In honor of Margaret O'Brien, who taught me that true wealth is measured not in dollars, but in dignity, kindness, and the courage to see others clearly." "Where are you planning to hang this?" I asked, touched but slightly embarrassed by the sentiment. "Actually, I was hoping you'd put it up in the diner. Not for my sake, but as a reminder to everyone who walks through that door, customers and employees alike, about what really matters." The plaque now hangs near the register, where hundreds of people see it every day. Some read it and smile, others seem puzzled by it. But I like to think it plants a seed in people's minds about treating service workers with more respect, about recognizing the humanity in everyone they encounter. Last month, I got a letter that brought tears to my eyes. It was from Jessica, the young woman I'd helped years earlier when she was struggling through community college. "Dear Maggie," it read, "I wanted you to know that I just finished my first year of teaching 3rd grade in the Bronx. My classroom is full of kids who remind me of myself at that age, smart and curious, but sometimes invisible to the adults in their lives. Every day I try to see each of them the way you saw me that night in the diner when I was just another struggling student. I make sure they know their voices matter, their dreams are valid, and their stories deserve to be heard. I think you'd be proud of the teacher you helped create. With love and gratitude, Jessica." That letter reminded me why all of this mattered. The article, the documentary, the consulting work, the small daily kindnesses at the diner. It was all part of a larger web of human connection and recognition. Every person who felt seen and valued would go on to see and value others. The ripples would continue expanding long after I was gone. As I write this, sitting in my apartment in Queens on a Sunday morning, I can hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door getting ready for her shift at the hospital. The same sounds that have marked time for me for years. The running water, the closing door, the footsteps in the hallway. But now they remind me that I'm part of a community of working people, each of us contributing something valuable to the world, each of us deserving of recognition and respect. Tomorrow, I'll get up at 5:30, catch the bus to Manhattan, and start another shift at Murphy's Diner. I'll refill coffee cups and take orders and clean up messes. I'll listen to complaints about slow service and compliments about the apple pie. I'll watch the human drama that plays out every day over plates of eggs and cups of coffee. But I'll do it all with the knowledge that I'm not invisible, that my story mattered enough to change some lives, including my own, that the work I do at the diner, as a consultant, as a mentor to young people just starting out, all of it matters. And maybe, if I'm lucky, I'll notice someone else who needs to be seen. Someone sitting alone at a corner table studying the menu carefully, looking like they could use a kind word or a free bowl of soup. Someone who reminds me that we all have the power to make each other visible, one interaction at a time. Because that's what I learned from my friendship with William and from everything that followed. You don't have to be wealthy to be generous. You don't have to be powerful to make a difference. You just have to be willing to see the people around you, really see them, and treat them with the dignity that every human being deserves. Sometimes that's as simple as making eye contact with your server and saying please and thank you. Sometimes it's standing up for someone who's being mistreated. Sometimes it's recognizing that the person bringing you your meal or cleaning your office or checking you out at the grocery store has a full, complex life beyond their job. Sometimes it's remembering that we're all just human beings trying to get by in this world, and the least we can do is acknowledge each other's existence with kindness and respect. So tell me, have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever served tirelessly only to be overlooked, undervalued, dismissed? Have you ever found the courage to stand up and say, "I matter too"? Share your story in the comments. Your voice deserves to be heard. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. It helps messages like this reach other people who need to hear them, other women and men who serve with their hearts and souls. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special podcast filled with stories just as moving. You can find it here by clicking on the left. Thank you for taking this journey of the heart with me. I'll see you in the next story.